All right. Appreciate everybody joining today. We're going to go through and work through discussing the inventory reconcile process within Dynamics GP. Talk through a little bit about what that process is, why you would use it, when you would use it, what it does, and then discuss some of the different options available for you to be able to run that within GP. So, to get started, we'll talk through kind of what can go wrong within your inventory, what a reconcile can fix. We'll talk about the GP version of reconcile versus the PSTL or pistol version. And then I'll also take a chance at the end to show you some of the SQL tables to get an understanding of what type of data is being fixed after you run that reconcile. Okay, so quick slide here on me. I'm Landon Morris. I'm Consulting Escalations Manager here at Implementation Specialists. I've been on staff for about 2.5 years here, but I've been playing in the world of GP for well over a decade, both as a consultant and system administrator. So yeah, happy to get a chance to come in and talk through this. All right, we're going to start going through today with just kind of a bit of a scenario. So let's imagine we've got a new item that gets created in GP. And when we set that item up, we set the item type to be sales inventory. That way the system knows that this represents a physical item that has quantities which you need to keep track of. When you first set that up, the item quantities are going to show 0 for all types and all sites. And by that, I mean that item is set up in the system and the quantity on hand is going to be 0 because you have yet to create any quantities in the system for either the all site or for any of the individual inventory sites that you might have set up in your GP. Some of our customers operate with just one site. Some of our customers operate with dozens or even hundreds of inventory sites. And so it's really important that the system be able to keep track of how much of each item has been brought in, how much has gone out, and what that balance left over is. So you can see what your quantity on hand looks like. So let's say after having created that item, we then do a receipt for that item. We process a purchase order, we do a purchasing receipt, and the receipt quantities come in as follows. We receive 3 of this item at our 01-NW site. So that's our Northwest location. And we receive 1 from that vendor at our Southwest location. Again, you could have different quantities on different sites. Some of our customers go even a level deeper to have multiple bins at each site. And it's important that you be able to trust that those quantities tracked in the system are accurate and up to date. So after having processed this, we should be able to see in the system that GP has now updated our quantity on hand accordingly. And it did. The quantity on hand for the Northwest site now shows 3. The quantity on hand for the Southwest site now shows a quantity of 1. And then if we look at the all option, which is going to be all of your inventory sites combined for this item, it's going to show that we have an on-hand quantity of 4 total. Great. Everything went as expected. We have now been able to successfully increase the quantity on hand for that item based off of the receipts that we've purchased. All right, the next transaction that occurs is that we actually sell one of those items. In this case, let's say we sold 1 of that item from the Northwest site, and the system is now able to properly see that that's been sold. It should therefore come out of inventory, and it properly updates the quantity on hand from our Northwest site to show 2. If you remember before, it showed that we had a quantity of 3 because we had received those 3. We sold 1, that's going to be a subtraction. So now the quantity on hand is 2. It also will track the fact that we sold 1 of that item at that site. So if that type of information is helpful for you to be able to track and see how much of this item have we sold, either overall and or at a per site basis, then this would be helpful for you to be able to look at. And again, it's only helpful if it's accurate. And that is where the inventory reconcile might come in. Imagine if the quantity on hand had not properly updated for that item at your Northwest site, and instead it still showed 3, even though you sold 1, and it should have gone from 3 to 2. Let's say that it still shows that the quantity on hand at Northwest is 3. This would mean that the sum of your sites, that being 3 at your Northwest site plus 1 at your Southwest site, would equal 4 total. But that wouldn't add up and match to what you see at the all sites record. And the screenshot here shows that the quantity on hand here shows 3, and the all site is also showing 3. That's incorrect because we've actually only got 3 here and 1 at the other, or 2 here and 1 at the other. So that should be 3 over here. But the math is going to say 1 at the Southwest and 3 at the Northwest. That would be 4. So now we've got a discrepancy. This could be caused by any number of issues, and that's the question we get asked. Why? Why did this happen? How did this happen? Any number of system or network issues that could have occurred at the time that you were posting that sales transaction or that purchasing receipt, or in the case of like an inventory adjustment or variance or transfer. If the posting process doesn't go through properly, then all of the scripts that need to run on the back end may not execute fully. And that's going to result in your end numbers not being accurate. But running a reconcile will allow you to fix that. So let's talk a little bit about the reconcile. So running an inventory reconcile utility for this item number allows you to correct the quantity on hand for the 01-Northwest site. So in GP, you can navigate to the inventory module, then just go into the utility section. The very first option you'll see will be reconcile. If you click on that, it opens this window that you can see here at the top left. What's nice with this option is you can run it on just one item number. You could also do it on a range of items if you wanted to run it on, let's say, all items from A to B, and then from C to D, if you wanted to do it in essentially batches or chunks. But what's really nice is if you have the same starting and ending item number, it'll only run the reconcile on that one item. Now, I will say as well, to run a reconcile in GP, you do have to have your users out of GP. I think there are some technicalities that would allow users to be processing other types of transactions on the financial or payroll side of the system. But if anyone's doing anything in the system on inventory or purchasing or sales, it won't allow you to do the reconcile. And I would also say we wouldn't want to try doing a reconcile. That's like trying to fix the problem while people are still playing in the system. We run the risk that it might not calculate to the right numbers that we would expect it to. So I generally advise people to have your users log out of the system, run the reconcile, and then once it finishes, you can have people get back in. But running the inventory reconcile for this item, when it finishes, it gives you a printout showing you what, if anything, was changed. This one tells us that the on-hand quantity for this item at our Northwest site has been adjusted from the 3 that it was incorrectly listed at to 2, which matches what we can see based off the transaction history, right? We purchased 3 and then sold 1. 3 minus 1 should be 2, and that is now what we see in the quantity on hand field for that item at our Northwest site. Similarly, you can imagine if the all sites record had failed to properly update. Imagine the Northwest site did get the right updates when we sold one of those items, but the all site record still showed an improper quantity of 4. If you run the reconcile, it'll correct that as well. And we can see here it says that the on-hand quantity is adjusted from 4 to 3 for the all sites record. So in the system, it'll keep track of those numbers separately. You'll have one record in the system for each individual item site that item has a record at, either because you've purchased the item to that site, or you've sold the item from that site, or you've transferred the item to or from that site. If there's any transaction activity for that item site combination, the system will put a record of that in your system. But it also always has a all sites record for every item, which should be the cumulative totals for each individual site under that item. Now there is another option within GP if you have Pistol or Professional Services Tool Library installed. The Pistol version of Item Reconcile runs considerably faster, and it is what we would recommend running if you need to run a reconcile for all items. You can run an inventory reconcile in Pistol, from what I have experienced in the past, in a fraction of the time that it would take to run the GP inventory reconcile. So a GP inventory reconcile in the past that had taken me almost 2 days to run, starting on a Saturday morning and the reconcile running overnight and not finishing until Sunday evening. I was able to run that same reconcile using Pistol in 2.5 hours. So a noticeable time savings difference. And that's just because the logic used for the Pistol version only tries to reconcile the items where it can see that it needs to, whereas the GP version would run through every single item and update the numbers, even if the updated number matches what it already was set to. It's still going to go through and just essentially double check every item in the system. The Pistol version only looks at the items where the totals don't match what they should. That's what allows it to run so much faster. However, the trade-off to that is that the Pistol version doesn't allow you to run it on an item-by-item basis or on a range of items, which means with Pistol, you have no choice but to run it on every item in your system. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And again, Pistol runs so much faster than the GP version. Even if you're running it in the evening or on a weekend, you can probably still run it in a matter of a few hours. Every customer's situation is going to be a little different. There's going to be a difference depending on how many items you have, how many item sites you have, the transaction history that it has to look through to make sure that those numbers match up. But I haven't seen or heard of any cases where that Pistol reconcile has taken days, whereas GP inventory reconcile, running it wide open, that is very common for it to be a day or 2, sometimes 3. There have been instances where customers have tried to start it 5 o'clock on a Friday, but it's still running Monday morning. And the issue there is you can't have users get in the system and try to process any transactions, whether it's inventory, purchasing, or sales, any transactions that might try to touch inventory if the reconcile is still running. So that is something that system administrators would definitely want to be able to keep a close eye on. That's one of the main reasons I switched over to the pistol version in the past, is because I didn't want to have to sit in front of my computer for 36 hours straight watching it go through. Pistol can be run in a few hours. Usually I'll start it, maybe step away and grab a bite to eat, come back and check on it, and it's finished and it's got the report printed out showing me what changes were made. All right, so a little bit on the back end. For those of you that might get into SQL back in the actual database itself, I always think it's important for people to have an understanding of the tables that we're working with here. In the SQL database, the item quantities are tracked in your IV 00102 table. And within that table, it's going to contain one row for each item site combination. And you can identify those in two ways. One, it's got a record type of 2 instead of a record type of 1. The other way is it will specify what site ID in the location code field that it's for. Whereas the all sites record doesn't specify a location code because it is for all locations combined, and it has a record type of 1. So in my example here, I can verify that the math adds up. My overall total site says that I've got a quantity on hand of 3, and that adds up based off of the 2 individual sites that I have this item at. The Northwest site has a quantity of 2. The Southwest site has a quantity of 1. 2 and 1 makes 3. All good. There have been instances in the past where a reconcile, for some reason, refuses to correct the numbers, even though we can see from the math this should be 3. It might still continue to sit at 4. And we go, I know that's wrong. We would definitely want you to reach out to our team to see what we can do to figure out what's going on there. But there are absolutely times where the right step to take is to do a SQL update on this table for whichever item number and record type and site ID needs to be corrected. And either our team do that fix or our team work with you to have you execute those SQL statements to update the records on the back end. We definitely want to make sure that we can get eyes on it before you run any type of a SQL update statement to ensure that you're only updating the records that you intend to update. But if ever you run into those types of issues where a reconcile isn't correcting those quantities the way that you know it should, reach out to us and we'll see what needs to be done. And just know that there are times where a direct SQL update may be the right fix. Okay, so talking about the inventory reconcile, how would you run it? You would go into the GP inventory module, open the utility section, and use reconcile. It's really helpful to use that one if you want or need to run it on just specific items. Or you can use the pistol version under PSTL, tools, inventory tools, item reconciler. That will allow you to run it on all items. And again, it will run significantly faster. One of the common questions we're asked is, when should I run an inventory reconcile? And I would say anytime that you know, or at least suspect, that there may be some discrepancies in your quantities. So if you know that a user has reported that they were in the middle of processing a PO receipt, and while they were posting a batch of 50 receipts, their GP crashed, I would say it'd be a great idea to run a reconcile as soon as possible, just to make sure that those quantities that were being received into stock got updated in your item site. Similarly, if you were posting a batch of sales invoices, which should be subtracting the quantity on hand for those items, and that sales batch crashed or froze and locked up, your GP, or whatever happened, right? Another prime instance where we would want to run that reconcile to ensure that the quantities that were sold got properly tracked in all the tables and your item quantities got updated to remove those quantities offhand. I also believe that it's a good idea to run your inventory reconcile before you create your stock counts, and also, or I should say, at year end. You want to make sure that before you create stock counts, your quantity on hand shows the most accurate value possible, so that you're not creating inventory variances after the fact that you may in fact not need. If you can get those quantity on hand updated first, then create the stock counts, it could help you avoid having to create an inventory variance afterwards, and that's always a good thing. And running it as part of year end is also something that I've done in the past, just again to give you that peace of mind that you're starting the new year with the most accurate data as possible. Why would we run reconciles? Because GP, like all systems, will experience issues at least from time to time. I'm a huge proponent of the idea that no system is perfect, but not being perfect doesn't make it bad. It just means that there are issues sometimes. Sometimes those issues aren't even really related to the GP product itself. It could be something network related. Could be that you've lost power or internet. I've seen where users have unplugged in the middle of working in GP. They've disconnected their laptop from the hardwire connection that they had. And it took a couple of seconds before the Wi-Fi kicked in. And the problem is that few seconds of downtime was enough for them to lose their connection to the database. And if they then try to process any transactions, it's not a guarantee that that's all going to go through as expected. So understanding that the need to run reconciles doesn't reflect that it's a bad system. It just reflects that, like all systems, there might be issues from time to time. The nice thing is the inventory reconcile is a built-in fixer for that type of an issue. Okay, that is what I have to present on the inventory reconcile process. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to throw those into the chat. Be happy to answer any questions anyone's got. Any thoughts you might have on the inventory reconcile process, if you've run it yourself or if you're considering running it, feel free to let us know. And you can always email us after the fact. We're happy to provide any consulting you need. Support at iscorp.biz for any consulting help or questions, or sales at iscorp.biz for anything sales related. So if you'd like any assistance from either of those, feel free to reach out. Okay, so to recap, I hope we've gotten a chance to cover kind of a best case scenario for how the inventory quantities should be tracked when you both receive quantities in and sell quantities out, how those pluses and minuses should be able to properly keep track of the quantities on hand. However, knowing that there are exceptions and issues may occur, you've got options out there for the inventory reconcile, either to use the GP version if you need to run it on an individual item, or the pistol version if you want to run it wide open and not have to wait days for it to finish. And then as well, covering a bit on the SQL side as a last case step if we need to get into the database and correct some of those numbers within the database. Okay, last chance, if anyone does have any thoughts or questions, give an opportunity for you to throw those out into the chat. We're happy to help any way we can there. Okay, so as a reminder, We're coming up to the end of the month. We do have a bundle and save on some of our tools. Mass PO close, PM unapply, PO copy paste, and the vendor changer. Contact us at sales@iscorp.biz for any questions on those tools. We'd love to get you hooked up with some of those. As a reminder as well, there's a lot of talk out there about GP and the support for it. Our team is happy to continue supporting GP for 10 more years. So feel free to trust that our team has you on that. And a reminder as well that we've got some upcoming webinars as well this tomorrow and Thursday. On the 29th, we've got a webinar on HR's role in organizational culture. That'll be at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And then on the 30th, we've got one on Business Central's Excel Integrator. That's at 2:00 p.m. So if you're on Business Central or considering Business Central, that would be a great one for you to attend. Okay, that covers what we've got for today. Thank you all for attending. I hope this has been educational and informative. And again, any thoughts or questions, feel free to send those over. You can reach us at support@iscorp.biz. So thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your day.